Like we said earlier, our controllers are going to be in charge of collecting data from our database and passing it to the required views. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how we can use a controller to actually control our application. So right here we are using callbacks, meaning we are just using functions to be able to return a view. But now we want to use a controller, and think of a controller as what is going to manipulate or be the center of our application. Okay, so when we receive a route, maybe we want to do a number of things before we return the view. If we continue doing it in a callback, it's going to get messy. So we're going to call a particular controller. And where are our controllers located in our application? In our app HTTP controllers directory. Okay, so right here we have a controller.php which all controllers are going to extend, but don't worry about this, we're going to talk about that later. Okay, so right here in our app HTTP controllers directory, this is where we are going to create our controllers for Laravel to recognize. So let's go ahead to our terminal, and I'll just cd to that directory, and I'm in my directory right there. And I need a new controller. Okay, so let's say the responsibility for this controller is actually displaying new pages. Okay, so I'm just gonna call this controller new page controller. Okay, so now how do I generate a controller in Laravel? I'll use PHP artisan like we talked about in the last video. So I'll say PHP artisan, and we'll see a list of commands right here. And if we go up, we discover that one of those commands is make controller. So it's going to create a new controller class. So let's go ahead and generate that. So I'll say PHP artisan make controller, and I'll pass in the name of my controller. So the name of this controller is going to be pages controller. And you see right there, the controller showed up. So if I head over to my controller, you see we have a new pages controller class that extends controller. Okay, so we're not gonna talk much about this, but here is our controller. Now, how do we connect our router, which is here, to this controller right here? Okay, what we are gonna do is, rather than passing in a callback, we're gonna pass in an array. And this array is going to define what controller we want to use. And the first key we're going to pass into this array is a uses. And we're going to give in the name of the controller. So pages controller. So we are directing it to the pages controller class, but what method on that pages controller is going to take care of this route? So we'll say at new. So this is the name of the class, the controller class that is going to take care of this route. And this is the name of the method. Okay, so when our user visits the new route, our router is going to pick up that route, understand it, and say, okay, this user is trying to access the /new route, and it's going to direct that traffic to our controller. And it say, okay, controller, it's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. Controller application, do whatever you need to do, and then render the view to the user. Okay, so now it's the job of our controller to take over. So our route has directed us to our controller. So let's go to our controller. Remember, the route said controller, remember to use the at new method to take care of this route. So we'll go to our controller and we create that method. So right here, I'll say new, and this is the name of the method that we defined in our web.php right here. So the name of the method was new. So head over to my controller and I'll define that method. And remember, we can do whatever we want to do. We can fetch data from the database, we can arrange data, or we can broadcast or do whatever we want to do right here in our controllers. But for now, we're just going to do exactly what we did in our routes file. So we'll just return a view, and we're going to return exactly the same view that we created. So right here, new.blade.php. Okay, so right there we're returning a view new. So if we head over to our browser and we refresh, we should have exactly the same thing, because we've just shifted responsibility from our router to our controller. So right here in our controller, we can do whatever we want. Okay, so we can maybe echo some data right here, and we'll say some echoed data right here, and we'll not return a view, we'll just echo that data. If we refresh, we see some echoed data. So whatever we want to do in our controller, we're gonna do it right here. So we're gonna be interacting with our model in our controller, and this is gonna fetch data from our database, and we're gonna display that data to the user from our controller.